Bam, bam. Susan, would you please take roll?
Be careful.
I will be delighted. We're beginning the Wednesday, June 2nd, 2010, Ann Arbor Downtown Development Authority monthly meeting. Roll call. Gary Boren, Dick Clark, Russ Collins.
Here.
Lee Gunn.
Here.
Jennifer Hall.
Here.
Kevin Hewitt.
Here.
John Heapshot.
Here.
John Lowenstein.
Here.
John Mola.
Here.
Steve Thor.
Here.
Sandy Smith. John Slitt.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. First, audience participation. We have one person signed up at this point, Tamara Reel from the Ann Arbor Arts Alliance. And again, 4 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. I'm going to pass around. Careful, please. Take one of the little folder ones. Take more buttons. Wanted to give you just an update on a3arts.org. This is the website that you provided some funding to help us develop. And can I just hit this and just go to it? There you go. Okay. So I just want to show you a3arts.org. How do I get it? There we go. Bingo. Oh, okay. This, okay, so last fall I came with a request which you kindly granted for some initial funding to help develop this web portal. And you invited me to return when we had gotten the initial thing up and running with a request for some enhancements to help the site support DDA initiatives. So I want to just give you a couple of quick highlights. A3Arts, that stands for Ann Arbor Area, arts.org. This is your one-stop shopping place for all things arts and cultural in our county. This goes directly out of the Washtenaw County Cultural Plan. There are a number of different components in here in this site which really are quite unique. We have a section where you can find artists in our county. Yeah, for example, this is Ken Kazora, who is a musician in our area. If you like, you can find out about Ken's. You can listen to him online. You can see video. You can see images on this. Why is this important? Well, in part because the Arts Alliance conducted an artist survey about 2 years ago and discovered that we have 1,174 working artists in our county. Now, 1,174 artists, that's a fair number of artists. But what do you think when you're going to be able to see 1,174 artists working on here? You're going to be able to see examples of their work, be able to buy those examples of their work. We have the same sort of thing for organizations, venues. We have events listings on here so that you will be able to find any sorts of events that are taking place anywhere in the county. You'll be able to go through and link them back to the artists. We also have a sharing section where people can swap things if they need to, kilns or artist space, or look for artists, or sell their merchandise. We also have the Arts Alliance section on here. But the main emphasis is really on promoting our arts and cultural area. And this tells you about the Arts Alliance section. I can tell you that this is truly a website unlike any that we've seen around the country, and trust me, we've really looked an awful lot. We've conducted nearly 20 workshops around the county to teach artists how to use this site, how to present their images, how to upload video. So this is not only a website, but it's also been an important training tool. Our plan is to populate the site over the summer and then launch it publicly in the fall. I am coming to you because I want to follow up on a request that we had made last fall, which is for this additional funding to do some enhancements to the site. For example, Susan said that she wanted to see a clear statement on our homepage section of the value of arts and culture to a creative economy, what that means to our area here, to the downtown Ann Arbor area, home to our major cultural organizations and many individual artists. The Arts Alliance has a new mission statement that we're looking to put up there. So I hope that I will be able to have a chance to come and tell you more about this request.
Thank you.
Wow.
We do have three 3 more slots available if anybody else would like to address the board at this time.
No, I think that's the last one.
That was the only presentation.
Yeah. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Brad Mikas, and I just have a couple quick statements about the parking report in the agenda. So I see that the revenue is increasing, but I noticed that there's 9 weekend days as opposed to 8 weekend days last year, and I don't know if anyone knows or has done a study on how much that 1 extra day affects revenue. That's just a question. I don't know if anyone could address that. The second thing was about the 5-year parking operating income chart, and I don't know how useful it's going to be because revenue has been increasing in order to revenue increase because of price increases to pay for the new construction, but without the debt service charges in there, there's no expense for that. So basically, you're not comparing similar things throughout the years. So you're going to see revenue spikes, income spikes, but you're not really comparing the same things. The last thing I wanted to talk about is the payment in lieu of parking. It's going to be a complicated issue because how much do you charge someone for a parking spot? I mean, it seems easy, $150 or $185 for a contract. But if you look at a hypothetical example of 4 buildings got built right next to the library lot, and they all wanted 150 spaces, that's, 600 spaces. So basically, you're just selling all the underground parking right now, like that. And so the point is that you're going to take all that extra capacity out of the system. In the future, you're going to have to rebuild it, so you'd want to charge the people, the developers, the full cost of replacing those spaces that you use. And I did some rough calculations. It's outrageously expensive, so I probably didn't pick the right numbers. But you'd want the initial construction, you'd want the regular maintenance, you want the administration from Republic, you'd want major upgrades, and you'd have to know how long the building was going to be around for, 20 years, 50 years, 75 years, because without charging the full cost to replace the parking spaces, basically the DDA is going to be subsidizing parking, which may be a good idea, maybe not, but that's not an economic issue or accounting issue, that's kind of a policy issue. So I guess to recap, I don't know how useful the 5-year chart is. If someone could address the weekend days and the pile-up, I think that's how you call it, payment in lieu of parking, is a complicated issue that should probably take more time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to address the board for 4 minutes? The next item on the agenda, reports from city boards and commissions. Ray Detter from the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council.
Last night, the CAC meeting was totally devoted to a discussion of a broad range of issues currently related to downtown. The major emphasis, of course, was upon our commitment to residential development in the downtown area. Last month, you may recall that Pat McCoska, representing Newman Smith Architecture, came to us to discuss a proposal for Zaragoza Place, Phase 2 on East William and Thompson. And the meeting ended with our voting to strongly support that project as meeting the community's expectations for higher density in downtown D1 areas that allow up to 180 feet in height. We support that project and will continue to do so. Last night, our guest was Alex DePerry, who has proposed several projects on the site of 7 houses on South 5th Avenue. Early proposals replaced those houses, and one of those proposals conformed to the R4C zoning, and that was approved. Now Mr. DePerry seeks to move and restore the houses on the site while building new rear residential units. The members were very interested in a very open discussion of the details of this proposal. It was made very clear to Mr. DePerry that we do not take positions as a group on private projects not in the downtown area. It's defined, last night we defined it again, by the revised downtown plan that was adopted just last year, and the boundaries of the downtown is defined by the downtown A2, D2 zoning recently adopted by the City Council. Individual members, however, were encouraged to express any positions they want to as on projects outside the downtown, as long as they don't do it in the name of the Downtown Area Citizens Advisory Council. Members were, of course, very supportive of preserving and restoring the 7 historic houses on South Fifth and the possibility of improved residential units near downtown. It was pointed out, however, that the 15-foot rear setback on the property that was proposed and also the 30-foot height was really in opposition to what we've accepted with regard to D1 in the downtown, where adjacent to R4C it requires a 30-foot setback, and you can only be 30 feet of that, so it's far in excess of what we would support if it were a downtown project adjacent to an R4C area, and that was made very clear. The D1 zoning actually rejects that, but this is not downtown. It's a near downtown neighborhood where some of us think the city should be more supportive of nearby residential units. It's an area defined by the city master plans as the central area. And the CAC will not take a group position on this project or any other project in the central area which is outside of the downtown and what we expect from the downtown. Our discussion then shifted back to what we consider to be clearly downtown issues. And some of these, of course, extend beyond the downtown, but they're in the area really of the public sector that affect the downtown considerably. And you know how much we support your efforts toward achieving the goals of parking transportation demand management plan. It's a great benefit to the downtown, a great benefit to the city as a whole, and a great benefit for the county and even beyond. And we also support the Fuller Road Transit Center. We look forward to attending the Connector Study report that Susan last night informed us will take place at the Public Library next Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. I will encourage the members of the Citizen Council to be at that meeting to discuss that issue because it certainly affects the downtown, even though, again, it extends into a broader area. We strongly advocate working to develop existing parking lots and available private space for construction of mixed-use and residential units in the downtown. Indeed, we've supported every single proposal in this direction, and we will continue to do so in the future. Residential and mixed use is our goal on these various sites, whether it's the Pines lot, the library lot, the old YMCA site, or perhaps even above the Blake. And ending on that, I just want to again encourage you to come to the party next Thursday, starting at 6:30 p.m. Everybody's going to be there, and I keep telling people that everybody can't be there unless you're there. Hope to see you.
Thank you, Ray. Next, status of task force efforts with DDA membership, the Library Lot RFP Advisory Committee. The committee, again, has not met since our last board meeting, so I have nothing to report. The committee to discuss a mutually beneficial financial agreement with City Council. Roger.
The mutually beneficial committee did not meet in that the DDA board members and the City Council board or City Council members did not have a meeting. However, the DDA
which was due primarily because of notice requirements, and when the city had to put their committee together.
Yes, they did not have enough time to do it this last week. But what the DDA did have a retreat specifically to discuss the issues raised in the proposal for the mutually beneficial committee. We had, I think, 8 board members here, good turnout on a Friday afternoon, and had a pretty lively discussion about all the topics, and I'll give a brief overview of what the results were. There was, I say, unanimous support for the DDA to be in charge of and manage parking enforcement. There was virtually no support for the DDA to do code enforcement. There was nearly unanimous support for provision for the DDA to be doing some sort of enhanced downtown services in the public areas, public outside, some of which are now city responsibilities. There was also very broad support for the DDA to be involved in the development of city-owned properties downtown and economic development in general. There was quite a variation of opinion about what specifically that meant and what would be involved, whether it would be marketing, whether it would be developing RFPs. And I don't think there were, I think we decided that this is probably worth further discussion by the board. But certainly that we should go ahead with the discussions with the city about the development of those city-owned properties and the DDA's role in those. A couple other topics that were brought up. There was a desire by at least one board member to get a clear understanding of when the Village Green project would either go forward or be given up on. Primarily because of the budgeting that the DDA needs to do, we're committed to building to paying for approximately $9 million parking structure underneath that building, and we are reserving funds to be able to do that. The project, because of the current economic conditions, has been delayed several times, and there was a desire, at least on one board member, to get a clear understanding of what the city's position was as far as that project going forward or being canceled. There was also quite a bit of discussion about downtown policing, downtown eyes on the street, whether that's police or ambassadors or some other form. I think the conclusion there was that this should be discussed in the partnerships committee to get a clear understanding of how that could best be done in the downtown. We understand the city council members of the committee also met separately last week, although we don't have any report on that. And we expect to have a meeting scheduled at the earliest convenience of both DDA and city council members of that committee. There will certainly be proper notice and about when the meetings will be scheduled. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Well, I just had a question as to whether or not the DDA's committee met independent of meeting with the city. You said that the committee didn't meet with the cities, so the joint committee.
No, there was no.
There was no meeting
committee.
of our committee either.
No,
ahead
no,
of the retreat.
only at the retreat. No, there was
only
no.
at the retreat.
No. Any other questions? Okay, that's my report.
Thank you. And the committee does not have that group does not have definite plans at this point to meet again. Nothing is scheduled at this point.
Nothing is scheduled, but
Well, there's definite plans,
Yeah.
because we have to meet with the intention of the provision, which is to meet at least monthly.
I'm sorry. I'm talking about the retreat sort of format that we held with the DDA.
I think there was a general consensus that it was about a 3-hour meeting. It was a very productive meeting, and that questions that are left open, such as the policing and development, would probably be very effectively handled in that sort of format. So I think there was a desire of the board members present to continue that format to address, questions that need more examination.
Thank you.
Sure.
Next, approval of minutes of our May 5th, 2010 meeting. Would somebody move that, please?
So moved.
Joan, and seconded by John. Corrections to the minutes. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved. Subcommittee reports. First, partnerships. Russ Collins going solo today.
Okay.
Unless he needs help from Keith Orr.
Yes, I in the vaudeville way of presenting right now, that's not a good thing. Well, the Energy Saving Grant Program, which has been an ongoing project of the Partnership Committees and a very successful one, we got a report from Dave Conkle, and all but $18,275 of the 2008-2009 grant funds were spent by the committee by the May 12th meeting date. And he expects the rest of that money to be spent on projects that are in the pipeline and ongoing, and meet the deadline of the June 30th fiscal year end. For the 2009-2010 grant funds, 52 energy audits were approved. 10 of the audits have been received and 44 are underway. And that's a lot of numbers. What I think is important is that the energy grant program has been extremely successful, both in terms of getting very small businesses to do energy audits, to get larger buildings to do energy audits, and then also encourage them to take the step to actually execute those improvements. And the DDA provides some degree of money to help encourage the execution of the energy saving activities or improvements beyond just the audit. And we're within budget on both the grants to do the assessments and to provide the encouragement to get the project done. And there's over time, there's going to be a tremendous return in terms of energy saving as a result of this program. So, yay, energy saving grant program. Are there any questions about that particular piece? Okay. Jeff Irwin came to the meeting and presented a big idea. And his big idea was to run a contest to commission a funky bike hoop every year. And he asked if we would be interested in that, and we said, go talk to John Mowat at the Transportation Committee. So the idea is that, and there's a lot of cities that do this, they commission, or they do an RFP and ask people to design, particularly artists, to design a both functional and aesthetically interesting bike hoop that is subsequently fabricated, and one of these are done every year. So anyway, that project may or may not move forward depending on what the Transportation Committee might like to do. The budget, there's a budget reallocation to support, there was a proposal by Newcomb Clark, or a suggestion by Newcomb Clark, about reallocating some of the funds that we have allocated to other projects to dedicate towards downtown police officers. There was a lot of discussion but no resolution on that. More information is needed both from the police department and from local downtown folks in terms of what the nature of security safety services might be. So we would like to get feedback from downtown stakeholders in terms of what the perception of safety is, because a lot of times statistics indicate that things are just fine, but there's a perception of issues. That's particularly true with parking structures. Parking structures are very, very safe, but they're not perceived to be safe. So the fact that they're statistically safe is only important to those who watch statistics, which apparently are not the more, the rational side of the human brain seems to be overwhelmed constantly by the emotional side of the human brain. And that seems to be a situation that needs to be dealt with more in terms of perception rather than facts. But facts are important, so getting a very clear handle on crime statistics in the downtown area and the number of calls in the downtown area will also help us as we process this through and try to make a decision about how we might want to deal with dedicating additional funds towards a walking patrol of police officers or other kind of dedicated service. So we'll get back to you on that one. And Tony Darendzinski, City Councilperson Tony Darendzinski, also is on the Planning Commission, and he reported to us that the Planning Commission is looking at the corridors. The thought is that the corridors from the highways that lead into Ann Arbor are not particularly attractive and don't send a message that we have a cool community and a cool downtown in particular, so they're looking at that. He also told us about Zorro. So, but everybody knows Tony, and he just likes. But no, it's the zoning ordinance reorganization project, and Roger Hewitt gave us an update on the connector study. So, if you want to talk about that, which is basically it's happening. I mean, it's on hold, but there's still a lot of interest. You want to do it. So, are there any other issues that? Yes.
Well, I brought this up at the partnerships meeting, so I didn't bring it up earlier during the mutually beneficial committee report. But I had asked the committee to consider making the mutually beneficial committee a standing committee so that it reported out like all the rest of the committees that didn't receive any traction from the committee. I'm just wondering, from the partnerships committee. And so I just wanted to raise that here, and I wanted to know what the mutually beneficial committee was thinking of in terms of noticing for the meeting. I know I read in the Chronicle that the City Council Committee noticed themselves on the city website calendar, and so I wanted to know what the thoughts were related to how our committee would be noticed. Is it simply going to be through the City Council, or is there going to be some independent notification? Is it going to show up on our website?
Well, I'm more than happy to make sure that the notice meets all of the city council requirements, that we post any information on our website, and that we notify the DDA board. The actual holdup for having a actual mutually beneficial meeting, and the reason that we went ahead, the DDA board went ahead to talk about some of these subjects, was because there was a feeling that the DDA board wanted to talk about those things, and the notice requirement, because of the holiday and because just the kind of notice requirements that are needed, couldn't be met in a way to put a meeting together in May. Mm-hmm. So we will make sure that all of those notices are out there. That's part of the deal, and if it doesn't happen, I will sit in the rain in West Park and
Melt.
wear a shirt on my back. I hope nobody wrote that down. So, are there any other issues about the partnership committee that folks would like to bring up or talk about? If not, I close the report.
Next meeting?
The next meeting is a week from today at 9 a.m., June 9th.
Thank you very much. Transportation Committee, John Miller.
Thank you. We had two primary things we spoke about. One was Amber gave a nice presentation about updating us on status of bicycles downtown. Some of the important issues are that the in-street bike racks are in for the season, for the summer, and that's been a good process and has gone nicely and smoothly. One other thing that's happened is that Amber and Nancy Shore are working with the police department to look at a strategy for dealing with abandoned bicycles. It's extraordinary how many bikes there are that are abandoned downtown, and obviously not only are they an eyesore, eventually they're also a hazard to people and use up valuable space on the sidewalk. So trying to work up a strategy and how we can help in addressing that issue. One other thing that both Amber and Nancy worked on is inventorying sidewalk bike racks, because we're getting to the stage where many of them have been in so long that some may need to be replaced and that sort of thing. So trying to come up with a more systematic approach of evaluating the bike racks, and what Russ mentioned earlier, for instance, these new notions of whether it's an artist doing them or this or that. There are a lot of interesting directions that we could potentially go in.
Just for clarification, I would consider an architect to be a suitable artist.
Oh my goodness. Well, yeah, I don't know. And the other thing that would relate to the inventory is going through and looking where any additional on-sidewalk racks would be useful. So it's that continuing effort, and I think we've got a kind of a good system starting to develop. Credit to Amber for her good work, and to Nancy. The other topic that we spoke about that was the focus of a lot of the discussion was funding for GoPass and for Get Downtown. And Nancy did a wonderful job of putting materials together, which you see in your board packets, and walking us through some of it. There's a lot of information you'll see in the board packet, but let's start with the GoPass funding piece. GoPasses have been going now for over a decade, so it's fair to say it's a fairly well-established program. One thing that will be exciting is this year they'll be swipeable, which will allow us to gain a lot more good information. So I think that's a major move in the right direction. And if you want to take a look in your board packet, I just want to kind of highlight a few things about the GoPass program. On page 10, you'll see that it gives you some information. There's a nice chart about the growth in the use of GoPasses over the years. This is a chart starting in 2003, 2004, and you can see the steady growth as time has gone on. So I think that's one of the very nice indicators that we can look at. The one I liked actually is on the next page, on page 11. There's a chart with the little table for each year of the growth in the use of GoPasses. And what's fun is that the one at the very top, the one showing the maximum growth, is for this last year and the direction we're going. You can see we're actually off the chart, so I think Nancy's going to have to redo her chart next year so we can get back on the chart. But it's a nice graphic way to see the growth, and especially in this last 3 years. You can see there was a jump about 3 years ago, and that seems to be sustained and continuing and significant. You'll see there's a little table below there with more information about the number of companies that are participating and the number of GoPasses issued. And in 2004, 2005, 342 companies participating. We're now up to 467 companies participating. GoPasses issued, 2004, 2005, 4,943. We're now up to 6,333, and you can see there's been steady growth each year. A couple of other things as we look at, we've got a resolution to bring forward on page 12. There's a chart, and what you're going to see there is that the funding request, but also I want to point out and make people aware that due to the increase by AATA in the last year or so of their fares, we anticipated that, and some funding was provided ahead of time essentially for this time period. So you'll see that in the chart labeled GoPass funding renewal request details, the bottom line, DDA advance payment contribution from previous years. And you'll see $75,000 for this next year, and then for the next 2 years, some advance funding. So I just want to point that out. That's already in place and would be associated with the funding. The significant thing that we're looking at here is that we had a lot of good discussion about the notion of funding the GoPass for a 3-year time period. And you'll see we'll have the same thing for looking at Get Downtown in general in a minute. And obviously, we felt that there were great advantages to being able to plan and to look at it in this 3-year window. So that is a significant piece. It may be easiest actually if people have any questions specifically about the GoPass, or do you want to wait until we do our resolution, John?
Why don't we wait at this point?
Okay.
If you have some more things you'd like to go over, go ahead.
All right, let's do it that way.
And
So let's. The next piece is Get Downtown funding, which is associated in the same resolution. Again, DDA has funded Get Downtown for a decade. The funding that comes from the DDA is for operations, service enhancements, and studies primarily. As you all know, it's a joint effort between we and other agencies. Again, we're recommending a 3-year funding request. We see that as providing good stability for the program as they look to move forward and be able to plan on a 3-year basis. The one thing to point out about the funding is it's basically a not to exceed when you look at the GoPass piece, because there's a cap on it. If not all the GoPasses are sold, there'll be dollars back. Let's see. On page 13, Nancy put a little list together, reasons to renew Get Downtown. But I think it's actually a good thing for people to hear about. Get Downtown program continues to offer high value at low cost for the DDA. 2 full-time staff serve around 10,000 downtown Ann Arbor employees and around 470 downtown businesses. Get Downtown continues to work with DDA to add value to the Go Pass. The Get Downtown program works with the DDA to enhance and develop innovative bike parking options for downtown Ann Arbor. Get Downtown assisted the DDA with the current parking and transportation plan by conducting focus groups with over 60 evening employees and by providing feedback and resources for the overall plan. The Zip Car program has been highly successful while costing the DDA less than $6,000, even as we added 2 additional cars downtown for a total of 6 downtown cars. The 2010 Commuter Challenge has been more successful than ever before, with 95 downtown businesses and organizations participating. So it gives a flavor of, obviously what the Get Downtown program is doing for our community. And as you look down below on that same page 13, there's a chart of where the funding goes to Get Downtown. I think in terms of any details that folks will have once we put the resolution on the table, I'd ask Nancy is here, can answer questions, Susan can answer questions. Yes, I'd ask that we move the resolution forward for the funding for the Go Passes and Get Downtown. I think that resolution is on page
9.
Page 9?
Yes.
Support.
Moved by John, seconded by Lee. Discussion?
I was just going to say that I really am happy to see the direction that the committee took in recommending funding for 3 years. I think that this adds a lot of stability to the program and really signifies our commitment to both the Go Passes and Get Downtown, that we're putting the money out there for 3 years instead of asking for a yearly, instead of doing it on a yearly basis.
Russ?
And I actually I know we've been doing this for a long time, but that actually is one of the things that concerns me. We have a transportation authority that has funding to do these kinds of things. So the fact that there's such a heavy reliance on the DDA to make this particular program go, and I know it's focused on the downtown, but it's primarily a transportation item where there are other kinds of funding that could be available. So the fact that there hasn't been a move to wean this program off of DDA funds, as a matter of fact, there's an increasing commitment over time, basically because of inflation, but causes a bit of concern for me. It's a fine program, but the fact that it's so heavily funded by the DDA and it seems to be just an ongoing budget allocation is a concern.
When this started, if you will recall, it was a federal grant. It was never any AFTA operating money. And then when that federal grant ran out, we took it over. And I think it's a tremendous asset to the downtown. And I think the fact that when Nancy came on board, and I congratulate you on bringing it up and up and up, as they say, off the chart in terms of use. We're not going to get any money from the AATA, so I really think the 3 years is a realistic thing to do, and let's just go for it.
John?
Just one thing that might be helpful for folks when thinking of it in terms of budget, on page 19 of our board packet, there's a pie chart that you might want to take a quick look at. And it is interesting because it shows the area in green on your black and white sheet. It says 489,136 for alternative transportation. So it puts it in perspective, 3.2% of our budget, and that's where this funding comes from, is out of that piece of the budget. So for what it's worth, put it in perspective in our budget. That's where we are.
Roger?
I'm going to echo a little bit of Russell's concern about the growth and the 3-year commitment. I think it's a great program. I'm certainly strongly supportive of it, but I guess the one question I've had about the program that I've never really been able to get an answer is, what percentage of the Go Pass users would be riding the bus anyway, and what percentage are actually using that instead of some other form of transportation? In other words, is this primarily something that is getting people to shift their habits, or is this primarily a subsidy for bus users? People are going to use the bus anyway. And I guess I'm a little uncomfortable going with a 3-year commitment without some idea of where those numbers fall.
Nancy, I mean, it's a really
Come to the
hard
podium.
area. Sure. It's a little bit of a challenging thing to do. We continue to try to find ways to get that information to you, and our last evaluation survey in 2009, we did ask GoPass users about their use of the GoPass and how that has affected their bus ridership. And a little over 50% of the people that had GoPasses in this survey said that because of the GoPass, they've started using the bus, they use the bus more. So we do see that of the people that use it in this survey that we've distributed, that the majority of them are saying that yes, the GoPass is impacting my use. You know, unfortunately, we don't have the benchmark data before the GoPass was in use. But as we look to do our next study, which again we're asking for some funding into 2011, so we can do another study, we'd be happy to find other ways that we can ask that question to try to get at that, because I think I would love to know more about that as well. So,
And I'm not saying necessarily that a subsidy is bad, but we should know how much are we subsidizing AATA's their users, and how much are we really affecting behavior.
Sure. Yeah, I will continue to try to find that information. Other questions?
Oh, no, I don't have questions.
Go ahead, your comment.
Well, I mean, to address the comments from Roger and from Russ, I think that if you look at the chart about where the Get Downtown program gets their funding from, the amount of funding from the DDA is relatively small compared to the amount of funding that's coming from AATA and also from other sources. And I see the AATA as the transit authority, and that they're actually providing the transit. You know, they're operating the buses and deciding where the routes are. And I see that the DDA's commitment to both the GoPass and Get Downtown is really a downtown, it's a benefit to the downtown, in that a lot of what our money is going towards is promotion and marketing of the transit authority, getting businesses to use it, getting the exposure out there about transit options, and there's a lot of benefit to us doing that. So I don't really see that we're taking the place of a transit authority. We're simply adding a benefit on top of the transit authority to the downtown business community.
Just anecdotally, one of the other benefits is not only promoting use of an alternative transportation, but also providing a way for people who otherwise wouldn't have transportation systems to work downtown, especially people who on the outskirts of town. So I know there are some people who simply could not work at my place of business if they didn't have the GoPass as a way to be able to get in. So, that's yet another use of it.
Russ?
Well, there's a nominal user charge of $5 for an annual pass, and that number hasn't been increased over the term of the time. And if you double the pass, it's still a nominal charge of $10 a year. And it just seems to me that other strategies need to be explored in terms of revenue opportunities. One of the things that would make this sustainable over time is to transfer it towards what the user is. I mean, $5 is so nominal that going to $20 is still nominal, again, compared to parking costs and those kinds of things. And I would like to see those kind of strategies considered as an ongoing kind of program and revenue source. If indeed the AATA isn't a funding source, then moving towards a greater. I mean, we understand that mass transportation is subsidized by government. That's the way the market works at the present time. But it does seem like the user fees could be examined a little more closely as a revenue source.
And that was one of the issues that I brought up during the discussion. And there is hope that as this program goes forward for the next 2-3 years, we're going to have a lot more usable data about how GoPasses are being used.
10 years is a lot of time to get to.
Well, but
especially
when
when
we start talking about swipe cards, et cetera, so that they're going to have a better idea of how GoPasses are being used, what routes they're being used on. And I think this adds an important element of stability for the next 3 years. Obviously, the AATA in the future may be looking towards expanding this program into other areas and so they certainly would have a role to play there. But I'm going to support this resolution for those reasons.
One other quick thing that I might bring up with folks too is it's going to be interesting in this next couple of years as AATA looks at their system on a countywide basis, what that means. So that's one of the other things we talked about at the meeting and trying to cipher out what that means and the impact on downtown.
I would just want to indicate that I would be supporting the measure as well. And note also that aside from AATA's investment in this, AATA is using some of the federal funds, a considerable amount, to reinvest in their downtown presence and the rebuild of their station. So there's even more significant, perhaps, investment that they're putting forward and to spruce everything up that's going to be brand new. I think it really enhances downtown to have this program feeds into that.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the resolution say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The resolution is adopted.
Thank you. A couple of other things that we covered at the meeting. Talked briefly about the idling ordinance downtown, and it's a concern of mine. For those who aren't aware, modern technology is such that you don't actually have to leave diesel trucks running forever, which tends to be a popular thing. And so it's something I think it'd be interesting for us to understand, look into a little bit more. Obviously, the city has an ordinance in place, and one of the first things is to provide that information to the contractors who are working on our project. But it's something that I think it might be worthwhile our looking into a little bit more. It's an interesting nationwide issue. The EPA is actually working on a nationwide program to reduce the amount of idling vehicles. The last thing I have is that Susan's working on setting up a meeting between the Transportation Committee and ATA board members to talk about topics of shared interest, as John alluded to. Blake is going to be coming online. Get downtown, future service enhancements, the county. So I think that some of the things that you folks brought up is something that we can be involved in those discussions and start that linkage between we and the ATA. Time seems appropriate now that they've got their staffing in place over a period of time. Michael Ford's been there long enough to hopefully be getting his feet under him. So that is the conclusion of my report. If nobody has any questions, the next meeting will be June 30th at 9 a.m.
Thank you. Next, Operations Committee, Roger Hewitt.
I'm optimistic this will be a shorter committee report than last week. First on page 17, we have the monthly parking number comparisons. Bottom line is that revenues were up about 9.5% over the same month a year ago. The majority of that is due to parking rate increases, although that percentage is probably a little higher than the actual just rate increase. So we're still seeing, despite a little slowdown, we're still seeing strong demand and strong revenue in the parking system. Hourly patrons were down minusculely. Again, overall revenue was up. Major changes in individual lots. Of course, the Fifth Avenue lot is closed for the construction of the new underground parking structure. Part of the Fingerly lot is now being used as a staging area for construction, so that usage is down. The Fifth and William surface lot has, now that the Fifth Avenue lot is closed, we've seen a dramatic surge in usage, which is good and somewhat expected. You see a number of large negative percentages on the and positive percentages on the surface lots that we've just added to this graph. And again, these are based on very tiny numbers as far as the whole system is concerned. So there will be significant monthly fluctuations based on the usage of those lots. Same number of business days. Any question of weekend nights? Generally, Fridays are probably a little bit busier because there's both daytime and nighttime, more nighttime usage. than on a typical weeknight. Saturdays are probably not as busy because there's generally less daytime usage. That's in there for basically informational purposes. We haven't really looked at fluctuations between Fridays and Saturdays. But total number of business days was the same period to period. There was some concern raised that maybe demand for parking was leveling off. We're really not seeing that, but we did have staff prepare a list of contingency items to address any shortage and if there was a decline. So we have a number of ideas in the hopper that if there is some concern in the future about sufficient usage, we have a number of ways we can address that. Clearly, a number of them are based on our transportation demand management plans, and which we are continuing to move forward with, although we're waiting a little bit to see what happens with the parking plan that has been given to council. And hopefully we can get a working session with council to go over that plan in detail with council. Any questions?
Just a question on this. So for the last few months, I recall that the hourly patrons seem to be decreasing slightly, and the revenues are slightly, even more positive. And I always forget, the revenues on this chart do include the revenues from permits.
Yes, the revenues conclude all revenues. The hourly patrons are just the number of people going in and out that do not hold a monthly permit.
So just for interest's sake, just to understand it a little more, if the revenue numbers were adjusted to remove the revenues from permits, so we just looked at hourly revenues, do you have a sense of whether that would be positive or negative compared to a year ago? Would the revenues from just the hourly revenues, would it reflect the trend in hourly patrons, or if you adjusted for the price for the rate increase?
I don't know. We can certainly get that kind of data, but I don't think we have it.
We believe that it would be positive, the increase.
And if we adjusted for the rate increase, like if we assumed that the rate was comparable, could we just see what that might be? I just want to know if if it's reflecting the hourly patron.
And you have to remember, this is the number of hourly patrons that go in. So if somebody goes in and leaves in half an hour versus somebody that goes in and stays for 8 hours, they both count as 1 hourly patron, even though one may be there many times longer than the other. But we certainly have the capacity to get all those sorts of reports, and we can take a look at them in their next operations committee.
Do we know on hourly patrons? Can we look at what the trend is over time? Are people so are people staying longer? Like, do you have the length of stay that you could compare from year?
Average ticket price.
Average ticket price from year to year. So could we get a sense of whether people are staying longer or less, and how that compares to the number of patrons?
We could probably put that together.
I mean, we're fortunate now that we are computerized and sophisticated enough that we can come up with a lot of data that even just a few years ago we would not be able to come up with. So, but because there are enormous different ways of asking questions, ways of looking at it, we just need to what people want to see, and then we can.
Well, it seems like
for
me, some of those questions would be important to when we get to the point of considering what might happen, what suggestions you might be giving to deal with the hourly patrons, to understand what nuances might be going on in the system, even deck to deck. It's important.
Yeah, and we can get that. There is an enormous amount of information to mine there, and there is considerable variation from deck to deck and also seasonally. Certainly, the campus, the 3 campus structures, have a dramatic different profile during the summer than they do in the school year. Okay. Other questions? Moving on.
Thank you.
Sure. We had a presentation by a company called Parking Karma at the last meeting. We had Joe and Mark meet with them, go over their proposal in detail. The recommendation from staff is not to go forward with this particular system at this time. Several reasons. The most telling one is that this company has actually never done a reservation system in a municipal parking system. They primarily have dealt with major events, things like the Super Bowl or something like they were thinking at Art Fair, but not on a daily, ongoing basis on a municipal system. And we really didn't want to be the guinea pig for their software and their system. There was also concern because of the number of limited entrances and the high capacity of most of our structures that we could have a structure that would have just spaces left for reservations that have been made with lines at the entrances of people waiting to get in, with the people having reservations back of those lines not being able to get in. And it looked like, given the high usage of our structures, it could be a very operationally problematic system. And again, the perception of the system is full, but there are spaces in it that are being reserved for particular people. Could also be a public relations issue. So our recommendation is not to go forward with a reservation system at this time, which doesn't mean we're not going to keep an open mind on it. And any questions? Last. We actually have a request. This last part is just some information. We had a request from, I believe, Wendy Ramsden of the city about, under the new A2D2 zoning, there is a payment in lieu of parking provision in that zoning. If you are constructing a building that uses premiums, goes beyond the base floor area ratio that's allowed, you're required to put in, I believe it is 1 parking space for every 1,000 square feet of construction under the new zoning. There was a similar provision under the old zoning also. The new zoning also has a provision that the developer is able to buy out of that parking, but it was not specified in the zoning of how that would take place. So we were asked by the city to come up with some recommendations on how that payment in lieu would function, and we had quite a lengthy discussion about how that could possibly work. We have what is strictly at this point a draft resolution on how to address that. We looked at the possibility of a simple bulk one-time payment for every parking space that was not constructed. The committee had a much stronger inclination to go with a surcharge on top of the standard monthly parking. So if you, for instance, had to put in 10 parking spaces, the developer would get 10 permits, but at a surcharge of an additional $30 a month beyond whatever the current rate was. This is actually a system that we are currently using for Corner House Lofts with their parking they have in Liberty Square. This would indeed give developer a guaranteed number of parking spaces. There would be no guarantee as to where those would be located. Just because you would be building a building near one parking structure would not guarantee spaces in that particular parking structure. It would be somewhere within the system. The rate would also, that $30 a month rate would also go up with the rate of inflation. We believe that the funds generated from this should go to the DDA parking fund for all the different uses we use the parking fund for, which is not only constructing new parking and maintaining existing parking, but also our transportation systems, as the Go Path that we just are supporting comes out of the parking fund. So we have a draft for discussion only resolution on, I believe, page 21. And at this point, we're just reporting this as a proposal to get feedback from. Feedback. Am I missing anything?
I think our committee came to the conclusion this is indeed a very complex issue, and we really don't quite know how we're going to suggest to handle it. So any feedback from anybody would be very helpful.
We did like the idea of an ongoing fee coming in. both could, if it was applied to new parking, would help with bond payments. If it applied to transportation, it could be ongoing subsidy for alternative transportation. And it wouldn't just be a chunk of money that would be sitting there being tempting to use immediately, where we may want that over a lengthy period of time. And since it wouldn't end, for instance, if we bond for a 20 or 25-year structure, this fee would go on beyond that, beyond the bonding period.
John?
The question is, was the $30 surcharge based on any criteria?
Pulled out of the air.
Yeah.
I think that's what we used at Corner House Lofts.
And also McKinley. We have 2 existing contracts where that's the amount.
Are there any, maybe a related question, are there any precedents in other places for
I believe staff looked at
other
that, and
standard
it's
cities?
done all different ways, and it's done in all sorts of different ways. There's no
So there
standard
is
way
a precedent.
of other places doing it, I believe, yes.
The city currently has a payment in lieu of option related to affordable housing requirements in the zoning code. And I don't know what those rates are currently, but when I was on the planning commission some years ago, it seemed like a fairly good thing in theory to allow developers to do. It gives, and same with parking, it gives the developer the flexibility of deciding whether it works for their project to have the affordable housing or the parking in their project, or else to pay in lieu of that. And it benefits the city, I think, in that you're able to aggregate the amount. So instead of having 1 unit of affordable housing or 10 parking spaces in a building, the city's then able to aggregate the payment in lieu fees to then provide that benefit to the community in one location. But the problem that I saw with the affordable housing is the rate that is what it is that you're charging in lieu of. And it seemed to me, when I was on planning commission, that the rate that the city was asking for affordable housing was, it was a really good deal for the developers and not such a great deal for putting affordable housing somewhere else in town. I don't know whether those rates have been adjusted in the last years or not, but it never seemed to be that developers were choosing to put it on site. They just pay it out, and it didn't seem like it was really equitable. So I think whatever the rates are, if this is going to be pursued, I think in theory it's a good idea, but it has to be something that, like the speaker said during public commentary time, it has to relate to what we're going, if all these developers choose to buy up this parking and we have to build 100 more or 600 more spaces, we ought to have accumulated enough money to do that without any additional cost of our own. And so what the rate is then becomes the really important question.
And, excuse me, I was going to, we are still going to research what an in lieu of lump sum payment might look like. I think it's important to tie whatever we're doing on a monthly basis somehow to that number, or at least to understand it. And so we have more work to do going forward on this, and we will do that work.
One last comment. I do like that this resolution calls out that the funds could be used to supporting transportation facilities or systems, because there could be a benefit, to as long as it's an equitable amount, taking a payment in lieu of parking. So developments could be foregoing building parking in lieu of supporting some kind of alternative transportation, and that's really important as well. If there's a demand in the future for people who are living downtown not to have a car, they don't need a car, they don't care about having a permit, but they want to have a transportation system that takes them somewhere else, that we're allowing that transfer of resources is really important. I like that it's spelled out in here.
Russ?
Yeah. That being said, we also need to think about this three-dimensionally, in that it's not just downtown. Developers don't just decide whether they're going to build downtown and pay fees. They also decide, I can build outside downtown and avoid these fees entirely. So again, we need to think three-dimensionally about it. I was standing over in the Kmart lot off of Maple Road, where there's a Dunham's and a plum market.
Was it raining, Russ?
And I had a hair shirt on. But I looked out, and it's monstrously ugly, but it's exactly what people want. They want parking, and they don't care about downtown, and it's sad. And that's not everybody, but a whole bunch of people. And part of me wanted just to take pictures or film this, panning across this acres and acres of asphalt sitting outside of a 1960s mall and saying, what we're trying to do downtown is create something on a human scale. And we at the DDA we know that, but we need to think three-dimensionally. And there's a whole bunch of people that really just want acres of parking with no vegetation, with no lyrical, walkable quality. The only way it looks halfway decent is if you're driving past it at 40 miles an hour. But that's how so much of our built environment exists in. So I just think that we in the downtown sometimes get obsessed about what we want to do here, but we've got to add that third dimension, that there's a whole bunch, a majority of the population that really only care about where they need to park their cars, not the human space, not the walkable environment, not a convenient place for people who are a little disadvantaged to be able to live and thrive and exist. And so anyway, I don't even know why I said that, but it's so easy to get just focused on the narrow dynamics of an exciting downtown, but that's not what we live in. We live in a suburban environment where we have to remember that most people really don't care about the downtown. They really they care about the convenience of their automobile, and it makes it a very complicated calculus that we have to work down here. And I think voters need to understand that it is a complicated calculus, and we as the DDA board understand that not everybody supports a downtown, and we need to preach the virtue of human scale downtowns, of walkable environments, of preserving a built environment that's designed for human beings, not for machines.
Who would like to follow that?
Yes, not to take away from Russ's reverie, but I think we have to remember too that we're talking about some place that probably is going to be residential and office in nature, and not where people go to get giant bags of kitty litter. So the parking needs might be a little bit different. But I also, I agree that we have to keep all that in mind. And I also agree with what Jennifer said, is that maybe thinking of it in terms of how we do the affordable housing payments. And the mayor probably remembers more than I do about, we came up with a formula for that. I think probably after the time you were on Planning Commission, the formula changed, and it was pretty elaborate. And so I think that looking to how that was done, we probably can come up with some kind of formula that makes sense for this as well, that fits in all of those different criteria of, you want to make it, in some sense, a tiny bit punitive in that you don't want people necessarily to do that. You want to also make it so that you get some money that's meaningful so you can do what you want to do, but you don't want to make it too punitive so that they say, well, I'm just going to go build a complex out in the township. So anyway, I think all of this is a good idea to look further into coming up with some very equitable formula. And I'm also very glad that Wendy Ramson and Planning asked us about doing this, because they could have just thrown some confetti in the air and said, okay, here's where it landed, but instead they came to us where we have some expertise in it.
John?
The affordable housing situation, the ratio and what do we call that, the payment in lieu, was raised because we felt it was too easy for people to say, well, I won't build a house, I'll just make the payment. And I'm trying to remember, but I think it's up to $90,000 now per unit. And that causes them to think about it. And I won't stand by the number. I need to double check it. But I wanted to go back a little bit to what Russ was saying, and I know it ranges a little bit from the question. I was downtown, and it wasn't raining, but there was about grapefruit-sized hail coming down, and standing there and looking at it, and I think that people in those types of parking lots that you're describing, it's not that they want that, it's what they're being given. It's what's there for them if they want to access that particular store or that service. But I think you're speaking also to the heart of why DDAs exist and why they were created. Because there are a lot of people that want to do that. They need the next downtowns need help. And everything that we do to try to make it that more livable, walkable, pedestrian-friendly, cycling, very pleasant place to be, artistic type of atmosphere that draws people, that's what we're supposed to be doing. But I think I really appreciate that you made the differences about what's out there and some of the challenges that downtowns face. Because we can provide every sort of way for people to get here with a go pass on the bike, walking, and I think when the weather's good, a lot of people walk from near downtown neighborhoods, but we have to have parking, or downtown will wither away. John?
One quick practical thing is that if it's going to be applied over a period of time, it might be worth looking at a formula or something rather than a fixed number. Here it describes $30. Maybe something that obviously can vary over time.
And just to show some of the complexity, for instance, there are a number of sites in downtown where it's impossible to put the parking on because the site's too small. There may also be structures where the developer wants parking on site to be able to sell or rent spaces. So it's a very complex, it's not just pick a number out of the air and that'll work. And I too, I've sat and looked at that big expanse of asphalt too, and I'm like, yeah, that ugly. Okay, any other questions? I don't think we have anything else. Oh, yes, I am missing something. Our wonderful non-colored graphs here. There's been some, apparently, confusion or misstatements about exactly what we take in parking revenue and where that goes and what the trend has been. And since this isn't in bright color, I'll translate on page 18. The tall bar is what our gross revenues in the parking system have been over the last 5 years, and that is also echoed in exact numbers in the column on the left column. So in 2009, we had about 13.6 million in revenue. The shorter of the two bars is the operating expense, what it costs us to run the system. And as you can see over the last 5 years, that percentage of revenue has stayed pretty close, between 42 and a little under 45%, and without any particular trend about whether that is going up or down. And the other lighter colored bar is the balance, what's the net income after our expenses. On the next page, there's a pie graph that looks at 2009. Again, this is a lot better in color, but just to explain it, of that 13.6 million, the largest, the right-hand slice of the pie, the largest one, that represents our direct parking expenses. The one in the upper right slice, 3.3 million, represents the bond payments we make on the parking system. The 2.7 million in the lower left-hand slice is what we pay the city, as both the $2 million a year and payment to the street fund. And the other, the 2.03 or 09 slice, is what we transfer every year to our parking maintenance fund for ongoing and long-term repairs to the structures. The other two slices, the darkest one up at the top is the DDA administrative expense, and the slice toward the bottom is the small slice at the bottom is what we transfer to alternative transportation, that being primarily the Go Pass and the Get Downtown program. So, give people an idea of where exactly the money goes to. That, unless there are questions at the end of my report. The next committee meeting will be Wednesday, June 30th at 11 a.m.
Thank you, Roger. Capital Improvements Committee. The South Fifth Avenue Underground Parking Garage. For those of you who are not familiar, the project is basically being done in 3 phases, or they are calling it 3 phases. Phase 1 is essentially the Panhandle down in Division. Phase 2 is about half of the remainder, and Phase 3 is the last section west. And drilling for installation of the earth retention system is complete in those first 2 phase areas. They are now excavating. Phase 1 is mostly excavated. They are now mass excavating the remainder of Phase 1 and Phase 2. Concrete was placed at the bottom of the Phase 1 section, the very furthest east section, last week. So that's the first concrete that's been poured, other than the earth retention system. And the footings will start to go in that section in about a week. The water main installation, which had Liberty Street at Fifth Avenue closed, was completed in connecting to the old water main. They now have Liberty reopened, and that water main now will continue from Liberty down to the parking garage, and that should be done in about 2 weeks. For everybody, we will not have a Capital Improvements Committee meeting next week per se. We are going to have a tour of the site once again, and everybody, of course, every board member is invited. Instead of our regular meeting, we'll be meeting at the trailer, I assume, at 11 a.m. So you should have a hard hat in hand for that, and I'm sure that if you can't find yours, there will be some spares there. Fifth and Division, which we're looking at right across the street. The curb was installed from Washington to Huron, and conduit work is complete. The sidewalk should be across the street very soon, and then they're going to begin work across from City Hall in mid-June after this block is complete. Construction at North 5th at Beeks continues with installation again of conduit and light pole bases. Sidewalk replacements and planter installations have been completed with children's handprints in the planters. It's really neat what's going on down on that corner. And for those of you who, the name of the preschool, Annie's preschool. We're doing work right outside of their door, and some planters have gone in, and the children put their handprints in the top of the planter.
That's cool.
Yeah, it is really a cool thing. That's all that I have for capital improvements. Again, our next committee meeting will not be held, but instead a tour of the site will be held, and that's a week from today at 11 a.m. Other DDA business matters.
Just a resolution.
Oh, I have a
resolution.
Resolution, excuse me.
Yes.
I've done that once before. We have a resolution on page 22, which I would like someone please to move.
I will move the resolution on your
Moved
behalf.
by Lee, seconded by John. The resolution authorizes submittal of an application for LEED certification of Fifth Avenue parking structure. Discussion.
I think this is cool.
John?
Well, many of you heard what my concern about it is is not due to the fact that I think we've done a wonderful job, the DDA and the designers and the construction team, in designing a very good parking structure that does a lot of good things from a sustainability point of view. I'm not going to support the resolution because, in my opinion, a parking structure, the LEED program is not designed, in my opinion, to accommodate a parking structure and sort of the gymnastics to go to have it meet LEED certification. I'm just not comfortable with myself. I understand that it's a very attractive thing to do. It would be great from a marketing point of view and for people being aware that it's a very innovative structure. So my concern, I'd have to say, is almost a more from a technical perspective of the LEED program, and nothing whatsoever to do with we or the design team or the intrinsic value of the project.
Further discussion? Jennifer?
I'm just going to say that I will support this resolution because I think if you're building a parking structure, it's great that you can build it in a sustainable way, but I think the fact that LEED certifies parking structures at all kind of undermines the investment in building an infrastructure related to parking cars and not putting that comparable investment into some other form of transportation. But that being said, the project would be better if it were LEED, to have it be LEED certified and have these aspects put in it. So I will support it today.
Further discussion? All those in favor of adopting the resolution, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
So we have one no vote.
Two.
I'm sorry, Russ. We have 2 no votes. But the resolution is adopted. And now I'm done. Moving on to other DDA business matters. No one? I would like to just take a moment to thank, this is one of our audiovisual techs last meetings with us, Dave Beatty. He has been with us, as far as I know, since we started televising. And I would like to thank Dave for all of his work with the DDA and just say good luck in what comes next. Is there anybody who would like to address the board? Again, 4 minutes.
Hi, my name is Red Micus, and I'm just going to take a quick second. April 2009 had 4 Fridays. April 2010 is 5. May is the other way. So May 2009 is 5 Fridays. May 2010 has 4. That's it. Thanks.
Is there anybody else who would like to address the board? Would someone like to move adjournment?
Move to adjourn.
Moved by Lee, seconded by Roger. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned.